Hi, this is 5 on 20 News. My name is Richard Aguirre.
And I'm Zaira, Livier. We're coming to you live from our studio in downtown Tucson. It's Tuesday, July 18th. First, let's talk local headlines.
Members of the Havasupai tribe who live in the Grand Canyon area are objecting to industry attempts to restart uranium mining in the area. The Canadian company Energy Fuels Incorporated is planning to drill over 1,400 feet into the ground to extract high-grade uranium ore, then transfer it to their processing mill in Utah. The tribe's sole water sources comes from a creek in the southern edge of the canyon, which leads into Supai village. They say that uranium mining could contaminate their groundwater, which could destroy their way of life and sicken them if they stay. If the waters were polluted further, then it could impact the health of the 40 million people who depend on the Colorado River for their drinking water. While the Obama administration banned new uranium claims around the Grand Canyon for 20 years, Energy Fuels is grandfathered in because their project at Canyon Mine began in the mid-1980s. However, the project has been delayed since then because the uranium market slumped. The main shaft of the canyon was drilled last year, and the company is preparing to extract the ore to supply the nuclear weapons and power industries. At a recent protest by the Havasupai, a tribal leader pointed to the experience of the Navajo people, whose land was used to extract millions of tons of uranium. Their water sources were contaminated, and cleanup was inadequate. A report by the Center for Disease and Control and Prevention found that the Navajo people died prematurely from kidney failure and cancer from the uranium mines. But Energy Fuels Incorporated's officials insist that mining won't harm Havasupai tribe and that the uranium will give them superpowers, which is exciting.
Super. A member of the Republican National Committee retweeted a message yesterday that wished death upon Arizona Senator John McCain. The original message read, "Please just effing die already," above the hashtag John McCain. Diana Orrick, a GOP National Committee member from Nevada, retweeted the message, adding amen in her retweet. Orrick took down the tweet after it began to attract attention and refused to comment on the issue. McCain is currently recovering from surgery to remove a blood clot in his eye. He's staying at home for a week, which caused Republicans to delay a vote on their bill to replace the Affordable Care Act. This might have been a good decision because two more Republican senators said they would vote no on the bill, which means Republicans do not have enough votes to pass the legislation. Republican National Committee spokesman Ryan Mahoney called Orrick's tweet extremely inappropriate and called McCain a war hero. Mahoney asked where Orrick would get the idea to tweet out inappropriate statements, then stopped himself mid-sentence as he realized the answer.
The 9 individuals confirmed dead in a northern Arizona flash flood were ID'd on Monday. At least one more person is missing after a flash flood deluged in Tonto National Forest near Payson, Arizona. Crews continue to search for the 27-year-old Hector Miguel Garnica, who was swept away by the floodwaters. Officials said that over 100 people were in the Cold Spring swimming hole when a severe thunderstorm rained down in the area. The victims of the flood ranged in age, but 5 of the 9 bodies were children. A GoFundMe page was set up to help the families pay for funeral costs, and its funding goal was met this afternoon.
An ethnic studies program that was banned at Tucson Unified School District is going on trial this week to determine if a ban against the program is constitutional. In 2010, then-Governor Jan Brewer signed HB 2281, which restricted public school districts from offering ethnic studies classes. The law stated that these programs, quote, promote resentment towards a race or class of people and advocates ethnic solidarity instead of treatment of pupils as individuals. The law was written in response to a Mexican American Studies program that was taught in Tucson public schools since the 90s. Republicans opposed the program after civil rights leader Dolores Huerta visited a Tucson school and said that Republicans hate Hispanics. Then Superintendent Tom Horn sent his Hispanic deputy, Margaret Dugan, to offer a counter speech. However, students grew upset when they weren't allowed to ask questions and ended up realizing that maybe Republicans hate Hispanics. Interestingly enough, TUSD officials said that students who elected to take the classes had a higher graduation rate and scored higher on state assessment tests. During the first week of trial a few weeks ago, John Huppenthal, former head of instruction, took the stand. On the witness stand, Huppenthal reaffirmed past statements he made that Spanish language media should be banned in the U.S., with the exception of Mexican restaurant menus. The final week of the trial began on Monday, where it will be decided if the program can continue to be taught at TUSD, where we'll probably hear lots more hysterically racist ideas. One question remains: if the Mexican Studies program is canceled, does that mean that European history will also be canceled, or is ethnicity only for brown people? Now in national and international news.
The United Nations recorded another record for civilian casualties in Afghanistan, according to a new report. Between January 1st and June 30th, 1,662 civilians were killed, which is an increase of 2% of last year's record high number. The report of the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan comes at the same time as the Pentagon is debating on strategy on how to handle the 16-year-old war. They are considering sending thousands of additional troops to break what generals referred to as a stalemate with the Taliban. The bulk of the casualties recorded in the report are due to a truck bombing in May that killed 92 civilians and injured nearly 500 in Kabul. This was the single deadliest incident since the war began in 2001. During the first 6 months of the year, more civilian deaths and injuries were recorded than any previous 6-month period since 2009. About 40% of the casualties were from suicide bombings and other improvised explosive devices, or IEDs. That was tough for me. Over 2/3 of the deaths were caused by anti-government forces in Afghanistan. The Taliban accounted for 43%, while ISIS represents 5%. Afghan security forces were credited with reducing the number of civilian casualties, with Afghan forces killing 434 civilians, a 10% decrease from last year. Defense Secretary James Mattis says that he'll release his new strategy for Afghanistan later this month in a star-studded primetime special that the president says will get great ratings.
The United Arab Emirates are denying that they are behind a cyber attack that targeted the nation of Qatar. A report by the Washington Post over the weekend quoted intelligence officials who claimed that the UAE was behind the hacks and that it was a clear violation of international law. Several Middle Eastern nations, including UAE, cut ties with Qatar last month for what they claimed was support for the Iranian regime. The hacks in questions involve fake news stories that were published on Al Jazeera, Qatar's state media network. The fake stories featured quotes by Qatari leaders pledging support for Iran and questioning the leadership of Donald Trump. After the stories were published, Qatar said that their system was hacked and that they were not responsible for the content. The Post story quoted officials who said that they received intelligence related to the cyber attack. This included conversations by UAE officials where they discussed the plans and how to implement the attack. Early reports placed Russia with the blame, but Qatari officials quickly dispelled the rumor and stated that the FBI informed the country that Russia was not behind the hacking. The hacks took place at the same time that Trump traveled to the Middle East to meet with leaders of Egypt and Saudi Arabia, who also cut ties with Qatar. Trump began tweeting about allegations that Qatar supported terrorist groups across the Middle East. Rex Tillerson traveled to the region last week to calm tensions between the countries and got them to sign a memo of understanding where Qatar agreed to strengthen counterterrorism efforts. However, the memo was quickly hacked the next day to include a header that reads, Qatar is Saudi Arabia's haram. UAE and Saudi officials blame Russia for the hack.
A new report by Indiana's Ball State University found that more than half of low-skilled jobs will be taken over by technology. The School Center for Business and Economic Research found that certain areas of the country will suffer from the technological advances and face a future of dwindling job prospects and poverty. The report said that this clustering of declining areas are contributing to further polarization of voters as red states become more red and blue states become more blue. It says that while many areas bounced back from the 2008 recession, other areas are stuck in place. They focus on towns such as Elkhart, Indiana, which suffers from a 20% unemployment rate. On the other end of the spectrum, coastal areas such as Montgomery, Maryland have regained the employment loss during the recession. Some of the jobs predicted to be lost aren't just low-skilled work, but many jobs in the STEM fields or science, technology, engineering, and math. Jobs such as computer programming, data entry, electrical and electronic drafting, and information research will be disrupted by technology, according to the report. Work that is harder for a machine or to outsource will be less impacted, such as recreational therapists, audiologists, social workers, and occupational therapists. These jobs require person-to-person contact, as opposed to the types of jobs that will soon be run by machines. I, for one, welcome the robot overlords.
Speaking of robot overlords, Donald Trump's tax reforms plan will increase the inequality gap and cost the U.S. to fall 6 places on the inequality index, according to a recent report by Oxfam and Development Finance International. If Trump gets his tax reform plan passed, then the U.S. will drop to 23rd overall on the Commitment to Reducing Inequality, or CRI, index. This would place the U.S. below Greece, who are suffering from a debt crisis, Spain, whose government shut down for 10 months in 2016, and Argentina, who's suffering from high inflation. The U.S.-specific rating on tax policies will drop the country 33 places to number 59, just below Peru, Chile, and Sri Lanka, despite being the richest economy in the history of the world. The report says that Trump's budget would slash social service spendings and would leave millions of Americans without health insurance. When compared to the 35 members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, the U.S. does especially poor. The U.S. is ranked 21st on the list, which comprises about 63% of the world's wealth. The report points blame for the rising inequalities, such as the fact that 43% of corporations paid no federal income tax in 2012. They also pointed to other factors for inequalities, such as the U.S. requiring no paid maternity leave, while Sweden offers 480 days, and the federal minimum wage being well below the federal poverty line. But U.S. officials say not to worry, because the country's richest will simply sue Oxfam and distribute their own report when the U.S. ranks number 1.
A draft of the Energy Department report was released by the site Think Progress and shows that the closing of power plants is not due to government regulation, but rather by low demand and low gas prices. This contradicts comments by the president, who claims that increasing government regulations has caused coal-fired power plants to shut down. Rather, the report states that regulations in renewable power plants play minor roles in the power plant's demise. It says that the changes were caused by a long-standing drop in electricity demand and prices due to the high availability of natural gas. However, the study is expected to change once it's released to align more with Trump's administration's agenda. The environmental site E&E News reports that the latest version already removed the conclusions about cheap energy and low demand. A spokesman for the Energy Department refused to comment on the report. Energy Department Secretary Rick Perry ordered the study in April and said that the goal was to ensure that the grid provides reliable energy despite government incentives for renewable power. However, Perry likely didn't expect the conclusions he got from his report, as it clearly states that renewable had a negligible effect in comparison to the increase in natural gas production. Perry allegedly ordered that the report be shot 17 times in the back. On the upside, it looks like Rick Perry finally learned what the Energy Department does. This was 5 on 20 News. I've been Richard Aguirre.
And I'm Zaira Livier. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.